The Arts House. World Lit is a platform initiated by the Arts House and features writers from around the world and provides a platform for them to discuss their critically acclaimed works and interact with local writers. In conjunction with Causeway Exchange, the Arts House casts a spotlight on writers from our neighbour, Malaysia, and our World Lit program will celebrate the best of Malaysian literature and help us gain a better understanding of Malaysian literature. So I'll introduce moderators Nasri Babrawi, who is a literary and cultural critic, currently lecturing at the Singapore University of Technology and Design, who will introduce our guest writer and speaker, Dina Zaman.
Thanks. Yeah, that's now we're doing a very postmodernist thing. She introduced me and then I introduced her. Then maybe you might introduce me. So Dina Zaman is she's a columnist, and that's a word probably that's very kind of alien to the Singapore media scene. We don't have much columnists. If you look at Straits Times, maybe you can identify one or two names. But honestly, columns are very strange to the Singapore mind, I suppose. And so it's very interesting to find out what a columnist thinks about life, right? And the most interesting thing is also that Dina Zaman is not just a columnist, she's a columnist that writes about faith. And this is another strange thing that's missing in the Singapore media scene. We have people writing about faith, but really not writing about faith, right? And so we might learn a lot from Dina today. How this is going to go is that this book, I Am Muslim, if I can just show this is a result of columns that Dina has produced for Malaysia Kini. Yeah, Malaysia Kini is a website that that's really something like the Online Citizen, but not quite. It's a precursor and kind of have inspired other websites here in Singapore. In fact, there was once a group of activists who were talking about setting up a SingaporeKini.com, right? All right, I don't want to take the spotlight away from Dina. I think Dina has a lot to say. She will begin by reading from her book, and then we can take it from there. We'll have a bit of a chit chat, and I really hope everyone here, it's a small, comfortable group. Let's talk to each other, right? There's no judgment today. There's no right and wrong, and let's have a good time, basically. All right, take it away.
Hi, very good evening to everyone. How do you want me to do this?
Go ahead and.
Okay, first of all, I'm sorry if I look really tired. 2 nights ago, I had insomnia. Went off to work yesterday, flew in last night. They're making me work really hard.
That's Singapore for you.
So here I am. I don't think I'll be falling asleep. So I'll just give you a little bit of a background. I started out in corporate communications because that's what my father said. And then one day I saw the light and I thought, I don't like this. And how much more can I talk about computer servers and all that? So I became a columnist. I was never really full-time staff. I've always acted as a columnist while working at other jobs. And then in 2003, I joined Malaysia Kini as staff. And that basically changed my life. But would you like to know a little bit of the story?
Yeah, does everyone?
So what happened was, prior to my work at Malaysia Kini, I went out to England under the Sheffield Scholarship. I did creative writing, and I was thinking I'll come back, I'll write about a great Asian novel. And I started having a lot of adventures there in England, partly because I met my grandmother's sister, who actually took the boat in the 50s to find an English count. She did not marry an English count, she married a German. And I met my German cousin, and from there was a glorious adventure because, just to explain what I am. I'm Malaysian, I'm Malay, I'm Muslim. But when I went there, it was such a eye-opening experience because I met my cousin Mark. And he said, at that time, I was fasting. And he said, you're a practicing Muslim. Yeah. I said, okay, come, we'll go break fast at the pub. And this was the beginning of everything. So I go to the pub, I got my German cousin, we're going out. And he says, okay, look, there's not much to eat at the pub, so here's a potato for you. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to break my fast with a potato. And then he has pork. And you know, me being this typical Malaysian, I went, oh, what are you eating? And he says, I'm eating pork. Aren't you Muslim? Now, I was in my 20s then. I was very, very naive. And he said, you know, Dina, you've got to realize one thing. In Germany, we're Germans first. And, you know, I was partly hungry and partly I couldn't digest this whole thing. I went, huh? Hey, but you know, your mother is Muslim, you know, I'm Muslim. No, you have to be a Muslim. And he said, hey, so you're such an idiot. Let me explain things to you. And I went, ah. And then he brought along some friends of his, originally Malays, whose parents all moved to Germany. And there's a bunch of them who were in Bath, right? These were all the original Malays from Kampung Baru and all, who took the boat in the 50s and 60s to explore other worlds. So they're all there. They've never come back to Malaysia. So I met all this quite a sizable community in Germany. I met the mothers, and they all told me, please speak in Malay, because we only speak German here. We want to hear the language. So I felt like a bit of an ambassador of the Malay language, speaking Malay to everyone. They were so excited hearing someone speak Malay. And I met, the children, and the children said that, oh, you're our first Malay Muslim, because we have no contact with our Malay families because of who we are. I went, oh. Then I went back to university, and I thought, oh, that's a very interesting experience. Then, when I was doing my master's, I thought, okay, I'll join this club, I joined that club. And one of the German clubs I joined was the Islamic Society. And that was really interesting because it was so international. And I saw many Muslim women praying in their own way, and in typical Malaysian, right? I don't know about Singapore, but being me, I went, oh, this is how this person prays. And I met one person from Africa who prayed in a skirt, but she wore a pantyhose. And there were all these Malay girls next to me. You look how this pray, you look how they pray. They go to hell, they go to hell. And I'm like, oh, why? Because you see, they're not covering their aura. They're wearing pantyhose. I think for me, by nature is all the time. By nature, I just like to observe people. So for me, it's like, wow, this is very new. And in the Islamic Society, there was this Iranian girl who said, oh, my father's English, my mother's Iranian. I said, all right, but I can't decide what faith I am. I've tried being a Jewish, I've tried being a Catholic, I've tried being a Buddhist, I'm trying not being a Muslim now, and I'll figure it out. You can do that. In England, you can do anything. And I'm going, oh, this is interesting. And yeah, that was how it was really, meeting people, talking to them from a lot of things. Met the British Muslims who had a different thing altogether. I remember I had this classmate who said, do you want to go to a party with me? I said, what party? Oh, it's going to be run by all these Pakistanis and all that, but don't worry, they're Muslims. I'm like, okay. And, it's going to be a pot party. I went, I said, pot party? No, because they told me in the Quran, you cannot have alcohol, you cannot womanize, you cannot all this, but drugs have not been mentioned, so it's okay. And I'm going, oh, this is a new interpretation of the Quran. Then I said, oh, I don't do drugs. I'm a very good girl, despite what you hear. I know, I don't do drugs. No, I want to go home. I'd rather watch a film. And I came back. And when I came back, I thought, hey, one day, I'll write about this, not thinking. And then one day I went to Malaysia Kini, because at the time I was working for Marie Claire magazine. It was fun. But after 6 months covering branded handbags and going to the fashion shows, I'm going, I like my bags, but I don't think I can do this for another more month. So I went to Malaysia Kini, and they said, oh, we're looking for a sub-editor, but you have to have your own project. I'll tell you this, Nasri, sometimes I don't know why I do the things that I do. I said, yeah, I've got this project, I want to write about Muslims in Malaysia. I spent 2 months in Malaysia Kini, subbing everyone's work, dealing with the writers and all. I didn't do a column, because I was panicking. I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to die. And Steve guy came up, oi, when are you going to start writing? It's been 2 months. But luckily, and the first story that I did, which is here, but it's not the first chapter, life begins at 40. Okay, so at that time, I was married once, I've remarried, but at that time, quite a number of my friends were going through a divorce. So I had a friend who was a crazy cyclist, was just going through this divorcing angst, through cycling, mountain climbing, everything, and he said, I'll give you my story, you interview me. And I went, okay, so I interviewed him, and it just snowballed after that. So here I am, okay, I'm still alive.
Yeah, I'm so glad also. And just to put that into context, the idea of life begins at 40 is actually an Islamic idea. Prophet received his revelation at 40, right?
Yeah.
When he was 40 years old. So this is really interesting. Are you want to read from the...
Okay. Right. I don't know which one to read actually. I'm revisiting my book. It was published in 2007. It's out of print now. I've only got one printed copy, which is a mock-up copy at home, which is the one I got for nursery. So there are things that I haven't read in a long, long time. I could read excerpts about the time, as I tell about meeting the Bomo, the shaman. Okay. As I told you just now.
Everybody knows what a Bomo is, right?
At that time, a lot
Silence
of...
means consent.
Okay. A lot of my friends were going through marital strife. So we were like doing all kinds of things, my God, you know. I had friends, right, who took off their hijab and dyed hair blonde and went started clubbing, and I'm like, oh, okay. And, you know, we had our own ways of coping. The guys were doing things. And this one was because one of my friends said, look, I am determined to save this marriage. So she dragged me to see a healer, and I'm going, huh? Why do I have to see a healer for? I'd rather stay home. And again, it was during Bulan Puasa. A lot of things happened during the fasting month. I said, I'd rather stay home and eat. Then she said, no, you better come because you're like my best friend. My mother trusts you wherever you go, so you come with me. Right, so I'll start from here. We headed towards Samani, and when we hit the town, we detoured from the main road and slipped into the smaller roads that passed shrubs, trees, and abandoned wooden houses. Jumbled thoughts ran through my mind. My mother's sagely advice on fortune tellers. To be healed, one had to be prepared to travel far. It became more apparent to me, however, as we headed towards nowhere, that we were not going to meet a Datuk Harundin type in a Darul Shifa setting. Harundin is an Islamic scholar and healer, very famous. We were heading towards a secondary jungle and dirt roads. The fact that the journey had exceeded more than an hour made me nervous. Okay. Who are we visiting? I asked my friend. Uncle Din. And who is Uncle Din? Uncle Din was renowned as one of the top bomos in Malaysia. He was supposed to be over 100 years old and has had 14 wives. He was an expert in Malay, Siamese, Indonesian, and Orang Asli witchcraft. He took on clients when and if he felt like it. His client roster included residents of the surrounding villages at the bottom of the hill, the odd celebrity, one who, according to my friend, had visited Uncle Din the month before to remove her bad luck moles and implant a Polaris, a charm to seduce men and help with her work, and a few ministers. Sometimes Uncle Din was paid, sometimes he wasn't. What mattered was whether he wanted to help. And why are we visiting a bomo? I asked. Because I was told, if you kena Siamese mandra, you have to find a Siamese bomo to cure you. Likewise, if you kena Orang Asli mandra, you've got to find an Orang Asli bomo. Only they would know how to get rid of it. Shit. My mother was going to creep me if she hears about this trip. Don't swear my car, it's rude, she scolded. You know, I'm not the most perfect Muslim, but this is shirk. This is not one to get involved in. 2, it is fasting month. It's holy month, for crying out loud. Islam said we have to ikhtiar, do our best, and God knows I want to save my marriage. I know it sounds awful to see a bomo during Bulan Puasa, but maybe because it's a holy month, it'll be blessed. So shut up and be a friend. So I'm going to just skip a few parts, yeah? Okay. Now, to get to Uncle Din's house, you have to drive to Jelebu to meet the guides that will take you to his place. You can only see Uncle Din on Tuesday nights, Malam Api, the night of fire. If he's in the mood to receive you, the journey will be smooth. But if he's away or in a foul mood, the arms of the jungle will reach out for you and turn you away. The sky will turn black and the stars will sleep. The drive was nauseating. Long, winding roads met with half-completed infrastructure projects. I saw a glimmer of the surface of a stream. Trees bent, weary from the sun and abused from loggers. Night appeared, and soon everything became dark. Everything was still. It was as if night never left the area. The jungle cleared to reveal more abandoned highway projects. rusted piling and cement blocks lay on the ground fondly like lost children. We drove on for a bit until we stopped at an abandoned construction site. It had to be the most isolated place in Malaysia. My friend honked a few times and out from the darkness, light shone into the car. 3 men holding guns with bullet belts draped across their shoulders came to the car and spoke to my friend. A few grunts were heard, money was exchanged. They left the car and in a few minutes a jeep appeared and one of the men called out for us to follow them. I croaked. Why were those men carrying guns? There are still a few communists living around here, plus an odd tiger. How do you know all this? I asked around now. Even today, I can recall vividly the last leg of the journey to Uncle Din's home. I can still remember the sharp waft of Ilang Lang as we drove into the forest proper with its bumpy dirt roads, the only way in and the only way out of our destination. My friend wound down both our windows because she felt the air conditioner was too cold. I felt the light rain kissing my cheeks as we drove further up. The air was so fresh, you could bite it. Did you see that? My friend hissed. She thought she saw or sensed a woman running past the car, a woman in white. I shook my head and looked at my watch. It was 9:30 at night. Where were we? So we had this discussion. Yeah? Okay, let me see. Let's see. Okay. Let me just check. Let's see. Right. I'll come to the end because I don't want to bore you and we had all this discussion. Now, to say I was fascinated by Uncle Din's model of cures and hexes would be an understatement. I was horrified, mortified, scared, and yet I could not stop watching him at work. He prayed to Lord Ganesha, chanted the 3 surahs that I recite for my protection, and before speaking in another language. From time to time, he threw ashes and peppercorns into a burning fire, while incense stank up the hut. He turned to my friend and spoke. He knew everything about my friend's problems. Our jaws dropped. How did he know? I can help you, young lady, but you must be willing to do whatever it takes. My friend was to find 2 virgin chickens from a kampong. None of the farmed and hormone-filled battery chickens you get these days. One had to be white, and the other black. And no, they weren't for his dinner. He was going to slit their throats and use the blood to turn back the jinn haunting the home and kill its owner, her enemy. I thought, it's one thing to doubt God. It's another to sacrifice 2 poor chickens. Besides, how did one verify a chicken's virginity? Did you poke its butt with a thermometer and wait for it to bleed on a white cloth? Chickens have virginities? I can't do that. It's shirk, my friend said. What do you mean it's shirk? Surely you know that Islam said to ikhtiyar, to do your best, make effort, and that it is permissible. You have come here and wasted my time, Pat Din said. I ask you again, are you willing to do whatever it takes? My friend looked at me. No. He looked at us and turned away.
Oh, yeah, that was quite an experience. I was imagining how it all transpired in my mind as you were reading it out. I'm just thinking about this idea of magic in modern society. You know, what is this fascination we have about magic? You know, the fascination, the bomo during Ramadan that this can somehow solve our modern dilemma. What do you have any thoughts on that?
I still write about that in my columns. I think no matter what a lot of Malay Muslims will say in Malaysia, right, about how magic, healing in that way is wrong, is un-Islamic, there is a strong sense and desire to also embrace that part of their lives, because without wanting to sound politically incorrect, they pray, but they also want, it could be that they want a shortcut, it could be that they can't find the answers. So they make, all these deals with God. Okay, I'll see a bomo, because I've got all these problems, but I promise after this I'll never see a bomo again. But I think at the end of the day, we all are human beings, we are always looking for answers. It is not through a bomo. through in a self-help book, we'll look through to tarot cards, or we'll rely on logic, on our rationality, horoscopes, we're human beings. We always want something to tell us everything is going to be okay.
Yeah, and I noticed as well when we were talking just now and about how you came to, when you went to joined the Islamic Society in the UK, and you see different types of people, and how you felt you're first a Malay, a Muslim, and a Malaysian, and that idea of very neat boxes that we subscribe ourselves to, and I do that too here. And like you, I spend a bit of time overseas, and when I'm overseas, the most enlightening thing was to be anonymous, right?
Yeah.
Then I don't have any boxes I need to be in, and because of that, I feel quite free actually. And so, I don't know. Do you think that this idea, just connected with the idea of magic, that because magic kind of helps us go beyond these boxes, categories that we subscribe to? Do you see any link to that, or do you have another thought?
I think Muslims in general have a healthy regard for the other world. We have the 3 quotes, Surah Al-Ikhlas and all, where it talks about witchcraft and the other worlds. So there is that healthy belief and respect that it does exist. And about these boxes, I don't know whether you want to pigeonhole that, but I think when you talk about Malaysians, we have always been a very shamanistic community. Even before Islam came, we've been very animistic. I think no matter how much of a Muslim we are, that DNA will still be there. And I'm just going to jump a few things here. Now the book is like 7 years old. I've been covering a lot more. And along the way, I've befriended a lot more anthropologists, friends who are like psychiatrists, psychologists. I sometimes wonder whether Malaysians are the way they are now, becoming more, their materialism is a lot different than how the Singaporeans view the material. I've always wondered whether it's because we have basically, through Islamization, we've killed our language. We don't say puasa anymore. We use Arabic words, right? Yeah. We don't say buka puasa or Ramadan. It's all like iftar, jazakallah. And when you lose yourself, your language, your rituals or your own traditions, you replace it with something else. And in Malaysia, maybe 1, Islam, 2, modern progress, work and all. You become a lesser person because you don't embrace your past. At least I think this way. When I read more and more about my culture, about Maitri and all, I follow this heritage group called Pusaka, which is headed by Eddie Koo, who's a marvelous historian and anthropologist. So I follow, and I have friends and even families say, how can you go and watch all this? Kuda Kepang and all that, it's haram. But I like shows like this, I find it fascinating. To me, it's fascination. I don't think I'll be jumping in. And they said, as a Muslim, you cannot go there because you are actually encouraging people to do it. And I thought, well, whatever. But I went in, and when I read the books, I realized that, when you talk about a dance and ritual, it's one way of dealing with your neurosis or your problems. Dance actually is very psychological. I don't know, maybe when you go to raves and all that, you burn up all the excesses, but movement really helps.
Yeah, we can talk about the World Cup now.
Okay, I don't know about that. I don't watch footy at all. But I think when you cut that bit out of you, the arts, the artistic from your life, what else do you have? And then you must understand, all this Maitri, Kuda Kepang, it came from the villages. That was years and years ago. Now a lot more Malaysians are more, wealthier. At the end of the day, you can take a person out of the village, but you can't take the village out of the person. But when you cut that DNA off from you, you have different psychosis. You see a lot of meltdowns, you see a lot of anger, a lot of issues. I remember telling someone that I said, this is something as basic as, why don't you just go to the gym and work off your excesses, your anger or whatever. She said, I don't like the gym and all. In the same way as, maybe if we embrace that part of what it means to be me, the magic, the traditions, we wouldn't be this angry. all this divisive. But I'm only speaking from the Malaysian experience. I don't know how it's like in Singapore.
Yeah. Oh, I shall speak on that experience, I understand. Yeah, I think that's because Singaporean Malays developed out of a very strong link with Malaya, right? And then there is also that same idea of Malayness in Singapore and Malaysia. And that is captured in the constitution even, right? That Malays are indigenous population and therefore has to be given some special privileges, right? And because of that, there is, on the one hand, you're trying to protect the indigenous population who stays here.
Yeah.
On the other, you're really putting them into a kind of box, right? I mean, and like in Malaysia, if you're not a Malay, a Malay must be a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
And,
By constitution. Yes.
By constitution, and in some ways it's implied in Singapore. It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of implied in that sense that from I can't remember which section of the constitution. But I want to now take a comparison with the bigger idea of Nusantara, which is also Indonesia, right? And Indonesia, the idea of Malayness is very different from Singapore and Malaysia. You have Malays who are Christians, and Malays who are Hindus in Bali, and Malays who are Muslims as well. And you have in Indonesia different types of Muslims. And I just want to read from one of your passage here, just a very short excerpt about how Malayness is defined in Malaysia. And then we can talk about it. And here I read from this passage about judgment and divisions, right? There appear to be a number of Muslims who are very judgmental of other Muslims. And they need not even be conservative Muslims with an exclamation mark. I know very liberal Muslims who look down on moderates as well as pious kampong folk and the reverse. Frankly, I think rural Malays are more accepting of people than the so-called urban middle class and elite. There is always this credo, and that credo is, that's my word, we are right, therefore we are better than you. I just want to ask you to comment a bit on this passage in light of what I just said.
I think it's even louder now. I mean, whichever leaning you are, whether you're a liberal, you're a moderate or what. When I wrote that book, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, not even LinkedIn existed. There was no social media. We had the internet. Now that we have the internet, and also because you can hide behind a cloud of anonymity, you really see a lot of hate. You know, I was just mentioning to Nazri, when I wrote this book, it was ha ha ha, hoo hoo hoo, yeah, after work I'll go and explore. And I had friends who say, you need to revisit this book. Compared to, partly age, right? You come to a point that, I can't do this late nights and all this, you get a bit tired. But this time around is so angry, it's so hateful, that I actually say no to a few forums, because I think that, I know I have to write about this, but I don't know whether I can be in an environment where it's so hateful. The people in here, they were just the average Muslims trying to make sense out of their own lives. Now, on Facebook, because it's part of my job, I have to monitor. So I see from the liberals right up to the conservatives. I don't understand why there is this need to monopolize the conversation when internet actually allows you to do that. But that sense of, I'm better than you, I am more right, I am more this, is even more urgent now. I came about last year for this interfaith thing that was organized by NUS and another university. And I was very surprised when the participants actually asked me, are you with us or are you not? Are you with us Christians on the Allah stance? Are you with this? And I'm going, I am very sympathetic towards your causes, but can I just be me? And they said, no, you can't be you. You have to make a stand. If you don't make a stand, then you're not one of us. And I find that even more divisive than your religious leanings. I mean, you can be conservative, but that is your path. You can be liberal, that is your path. But when you start saying you're either with us or not, it gets me. And I don't know, I have very mixed feelings when I observe this. I sometimes wonder, does social media make you more angry? Or has the world changed? This book is 7 years old. If I were to revisit this book, it's a different dimension. I don't know whether I've aged, I've matured or whatever, or things are different now. But all I can see is that in Malaysia right now, it is an angrier place to be.
Yeah, I was thinking about being angry, on this question of being angry, right? Some people are going to be very angry on the first of Ramadan, actually. I mean, this is something that probably some of us should talk about. And this is that campaign that we were talking about, the Wear White campaign, right? And this Wear White campaign basically is a campaign that is antithetical to the Pink Dot movement, which is about the LGBT movement. And you've written 2 chapters in your book about LGBT issues and stuff like that. So I just want to talk about that a bit more, the idea of the LGBT and all these kind of polemics that we say. You're a liberal and you want to say I have to be like this, and if you're a conservative, you say you want to be like this. So wear white, and now the Christians, surprisingly, I mean some Christians, not all Christians, are joining some of these other Muslims to wear white together to signal their protest against the LGBT group. How do you think a thing like this could develop? Do you think it's like it will escalate into something and then it will explode, or is there a better way of doing things?
Okay, because this is about Singapore and I'm not very well versed. I'm not going to make any political comments.
No.
I mean, it wouldn't be fair because I only saw a snippet of it this morning and I'm like, okay, what's on, and then I had to come here. But I think if you look at the overall picture, okay, this is just me. I think that this is mainly about the Muslims it was going, right? And it's the Christians who joined. When you're dealing with a minority community like the Malays in Singapore, while I understand in most religions that homosexuality is basically a no-no, but when you deal with issues of being a minority, I would like to think that there are bigger things to look at about the empowerment of a community. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I actually tell friends, right? This LGBT issues that you see, people say it will actually break a community, break the ummah and all. But I don't see that because I have many gay friends, men and women, and they tell me they seem to be very productive people. So how does that work? So in the case of Singapore, I would be worried and not so worried. It's probably going to just disappear. Yeah? 1. But 2, the Muslim community in Singapore should also look at the overall picture. Being a minority, I'm not saying that you should go against the majority of the Singaporeans, but there are bigger issues to look at.
Right. Yeah. Just thinking about what Dina is saying. Now, does anyone have any questions? We'll take a break. And if you have questions, please.
I think when it comes to Malaysia, and maybe it applies here, I wouldn't want to see that Malaysians are, disenfranchised. That we have made, a lot of successes in leaps and bounds. But I would think that the main thing off my mind is the things that we have to look at, like corruption, the economy of the country, democracy. We are also talking about, elections. These are, these things impact society at a bigger level. I remember I had this chat with someone, and that one really turned my head on. It was a very senior academic who said it's better to have a corrupt leader than, no leader at all. And I thought, okay, that really, what on earth are you trying to say here? But for me, there are bigger issues. I know people have said that, I've actually had people say, you cannot have this LGBT community because you're going to start, 1, they want to have the human rights, that's 1. 2, they will actually splinter the whole thing. But when I think about it, how big is the community in Malaysia, right? And most that I know are very law-abiding. They're just doing their thing. But it's a very mixed thing in Malaysia because I have a few friends who are, transgenders, hairdressers and all that. And they did say this, that, we have been doing our work activism work with the authorities very quietly. Having it out in the open sort of like waters down, kills the whole activism. So it's very, very mixed. I don't have real answers, but I would say that the bigger thing to education. I mentioned earlier at a workshop, we have this, our education system keeps changing. I see this in my nephew. My nephew was actually educated in Singapore for a year. Then the parents had to move back. He had to cope with different education system. In the next 2-3 years, it's a different curriculum. And he's like, Nana, I'm already confused. I said, I'm also confused. I don't know what to, how can I help you? So education is one, corruption is another, yeah? And I think for me, as a former journalist, I think one of the bigger things that we need to learn is how to actually engage with each other. Again, in Singapore, I'm not going to touch this either, but in Malaysia, it's always been ethnically divided. So despite the BMWs and the Chanels and all that, we are increasingly divided and we don't know how to talk to each other. We are very superficial. Oh yeah, this is my Chinese friend, and I don't know. But behind it, you will see that division, and it's very, very unhealthy and very frightening for me, because I think this is really schizophrenic. One moment you're like this, next moment you're like that. We have not learned, and now, even as a Muslim, I see this in Malaysia, where now you see a lot of right-wing groups saying, this is what we want Malay rights, Muslim rights, every one of you can just basically take the boat and go off to wherever. That is a very big issue for me, because we're all Malaysians. At the end of the day, these people, whatever, they live there, they have contributed to the economy. And because we all have different faiths, I mean, why be against them? It's surely there must be a middle path. So I would consider all this a little bit bigger than LGBT issues, though other people would say no.
Yeah, this is also the idea of the Bumiputra policy, right? I mean, something that's kind of different from Singapore in that sense. Do you want to expand a bit more?
Well, go on a bit. We have in the 70s, we came out with a new economic policy. Basically, it was supposed to actually help Malays, or the original people of Malaya, right, to be a bit more economically empowered. Along the way, like all good things, it got hijacked and corrupted. So now, I wouldn't say that all Malays are rich. No, there are many, many poor Malays, or Malays who are struggling to make a living. But I can see that also for my Chinese friends, for my Indian friends, for, the other races. But this is going to be a long, long thing. It's something which we will have to deal with, because right now, I also think that a lot of Malays are grasping at Islam because they say, all right, my rights, my economic rights and my social rights are being eroded because nobody believes in NEP. Everybody says, okay, I've got one thing out now. I've got Islam. I'm a Muslim, you guys are going to go to hell. Now, for me as a believer, I believe when it comes to your faith in Islam, you have to really believe in it. You cannot politicize it. Waving it right as this weekend, it just doesn't do any good, especially to a multiracial country. So you have to tread very, very carefully. It frightens a lot of people, a lot of Malays, even the conservative ones. I mean, are like, okay, what is happening to our country? It didn't used to be like this. We used to be actually quite happy. And now it's changed, I think, in the last 5 years. One reason why I left the media last year after general elections was I told my boss, one, I want to do a fellowship, and two, I don't understand my country anymore. It's becoming more and more hateful. I'm not comfortable with that. I need to get out of 1 year, 2 years, and maybe I'll go back to the media and cover this. But I need breathing space. I have never seen so much negativity.
And now that you're back, do you see it continuing on? Or?
I think it's also a very different dimension. It's also about class, yeah? And now that I've been on it for 6 months, 8 months, I think, right, it's all about class, even among the Muslims. Now, a lot of Malay Muslims, I don't know whether they've cottoned on or not. The ones who are driving the economy are not just the Chinese or Indians. but there are also Chinese Muslims, Indian Muslims, who probably have a longer tradition of Islam than the Malays, but they haven't woken up to that yet. So when they do, there'll probably be a lot of boo-bah in the newspapers, and you go, oh, yeah. But it's all about money, and I see a bigger divide now among the haves and have-nots. When I do my field work, I go to the less urban areas, and you see these people who are just struggling, really, really struggling. And then you have, in KL, the so-called privileged Muslimah. They have the cars, they have the houses and all. And the arrogance that comes from there frightens me, because I think, one, Islam doesn't tell you to be this arrogant, and two, just because you've got more education, you've got everything, right? You shouldn't be looking down on other people because they have less or less, a lesser education. I have been told this. I've been told by many people, oh, you actually deal with the masses. Well, yeah, they're my friends, one, two, it's work. Oh, they have not been enlightened. I'm like, what on earth is that supposed to mean? And I remember I had this big fight with one academy. You keep talking about Malay rights, the Malays this, the Malays that. Why don't you go back to the kampung and go and help these people? No. That's another thing about us in Malaysia. We want to forget our past, our roots. Despite talking, actually, I'm from the kampung, I'm a Malay boy, they don't want to acknowledge it. It's like, I don't know whether they're ashamed of it, or it's something, you're losing a floss of shit in the head or what. But there's a fantastic book by James C. Scott, Weapons of the Weak. It's about this anthropologist who spent 3 years in a kampung in Kedah, and he talked about the division among all the political parties, whether they are opposition or barisan, and how the villagers coped with it. It's a fascinating book, but also very distressing, because you come out, you feel nothing has changed for the last 30, 40 years.
So fascinating. But I want to open up to the floor again. Anybody wants to ask any question?
You just mentioned that because of people want to forget where they came from. And then earlier on you also talked about Malaysia forgetting about its roots. So I just wanted to ask whether there are any influences of not embracing the Adat or like early culture on Islamization process. So maybe what are the influences of this break from the history on the Islamization process in Malaysia?
I think it's very political. And this is something which I discovered when I was doing my fellowship, so it's like learning about my country again. I think likewise, like in Singapore, when Islam came here, it was through trade. And of course, it was very sophisticated in nature, and there was that mystical bit which a lot of us liked. Now, in the 50s, 60s, right, when we were still under colonial rule, of course, there were activists, teachers telling, look, you have to, be free. And in Malaysia, I think Singapore had that, the Kaum Muda, yeah? Now, Kaum Muda were like a group of teachers who studied in Al-Azhar. Now, if you go even back, right, you will realize that the leadings are more Wahhabi and Salafi. They are it's basically a very literal interpretation of Islam. Whereas the other interpretations of Islam are a little bit, they're more open and more forgiving. This is like black and white, no shades of grey. And it appeals to a lot of people, I suppose, because you know what? You don't have to deal with rituals. It's very easy to do. I'll give you one example. When someone dies in Malaysia, you probably do like 40 days of remembrance, prayers, etc. Now you slowly see this going away. People say it's haram, it's this, haram is that. When my husband's late father passed away, my mother-in-law was told, you cannot have any prayers. He said, I want to grieve, he's my husband. I said, no, in Islam, nothing like that. And you cannot, go out of the house for 40 days. You just have to stay in. She said, I'm not rich. I don't have a driver. I need to go out and get groceries. But that kind of Islam appeals to many because it's very, very clean in that sense. No rituals, no extra. But it's also very, very dogmatic. It's also very literal. It can be very harsh. So why do you see what you see in Saudi right now? That is why we are what we are now. We're no longer the Muslims that we were once. But a lot of Malays believe that, okay, because the Saudis are saying this, and they are Arabs, they should know a lot more about Islam than us, because we are newer to the religion. We follow that path.
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about this, I'm just reminded, I'll get back to you, Gulizar, but this idea of Islam in 1,000 words, it is a very interesting thing, because you talked about this very clean view of Islam, and it seems to me that the idea of Islam in 1,000 words, not a critic, I'm just wondering, religion to some people is a mode of making life easier for them, right? Because life without meaning, without a direction, is a very scary life. No meaning, what life can you live, right? So it's a cookie cutter Islam in a sense, You get very strict way, or you do this, you get this, you do this, you get that, right? That idea of Islam in 1,000 words, right? And you want to speak a bit more about this, or the idea? Okay. She already spoke about it. Yeah. But I just want to check with Gulizar. Do you want to ask further about that, or is this? Yeah, okay. Then any question from other people then? All right.
How do you define freedom today, and what's the comparison between the past of Malaysia and today's Malaysia? And can you see what is Malaysia tomorrow?
I don't have a crystal ball. How do I define freedom? Personally, to be able to do what you want to do. Yeah. To be able to think, read, write what you want to write. That to me is freedom. But then there's also financial freedom. There's also physical freedoms. So it's personally for me to be able to do what I want. Yeah. How do I see? I think the old Malaysia was a more embracing one. My mum just told me when I flew here, my dad went to VI, Victoria's Institution. Every time he goes to a VI gathering, right, he comes back, he's like in tears, because a lot of his friends have migrated. But it also spoke about a very inclusive time, where it didn't matter what faith or religion or you're still friends. You're talking about men who are 75, who are holding each other, and you're talking about the illnesses, the gout, who passed on and on. It's very multicultural. And now I see, I don't see that. It's very, okay, I'm this, I'm in that group, I'm in that group. In the urban areas, you probably see a few people who are mixed, but you don't see that as much as before. Yeah, I think also the old Malaysia there was a lot more healthy debate and a lot more acceptance. Like, okay lah, whatever lah. But now it's very divisive. The Christians are angry, the Muslims are angry, everyone's angry with each other. Are we engaging? And I also think that as you progress, one thing about KL, which I've always said that's going to be a detriment to society, is that it has this high school mentality, this playground politics. This is my gang, that's my gang, and all that. So that actually spills over into your work, even into politics. It doesn't hold the country well at all. It has to expand. In many ways, we still behave like we're in a little village. And now that it is 2014, we need to look at it a little bit more. I believe you can still be an observant Muslim, Christian, hold on to your faith without having to resort to this kind of behaviors. But that's me being idealistic. The last one. Where do I see Malaysia? I think that if things don't improve, and you've been probably reading about us for the last 3 to 5 years, and we've had every week there's some excitement. My God, ooh.
You need to go to the cinema.
Yeah, no, you just open up the newspaper and you go, oh God, I think in the next 5 years, if there is no one to stem all this, right, it will implode. And it's not just going to be about class. Even within the Muslims, it's going to be about class and, who's a better Muslim, you or me?
Yeah, we kind of see that happening here a little. Any questions from, one at the back?
Hi, I'm wondering if there is a language of ideas amongst, especially Malaysian youths. Do they talk about ideas in a general sense and make it as a cultural code of discussion and not just talk about politics or group mentalities, but just ideas for ideas' sake? I wonder if there exists such a culture.
I think that's a fantastic question. I don't think we have that in Malaysia. One, the media in Malaysia is, we're all pressed for time, we're all pressed for money. So we depend on columnists to, instigate debate. But I think in Malaysia, everyone's so political, they cannot see ideas, it's that little focus. When you try to bring in ideas, it just flies past them. I'm hoping what you've just asked will become the norm in the next few years, but not now. Maybe someone needs to actually expand that. Someone needs to start that.
Would you be the one to do that?
Let me Google and figure out this thing.
Any follow-up questions or any questions from the floor? Yes, we have 2 questions. We can take them both.
Hi, so in Malaysia and Singapore, there's this selling of cosmopolitan idea of as well globalized countries. I was wondering the question regarding endogamy and the tradition for the Malays to marry within.
Yeah.
So what now is the identity for the Malay, and what are the questions regarding the institution of family and marriage for the Malay who is seeking social mobility or maybe seeking so-called modernity through marriage?
Should I answer that first?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's basically a whole mix of things. But I think now, if before there were a lot more interracial marriages, or interfaith marriages, we don't have that now. You can marry a man or a woman who is not Malay, but he has to be Muslim. And we're not talking about conversions. I noticed there seems to be a rise of a lot of Malay women marrying Westerners who had converted to Islam first. Then they fall in love and marry. So that seems to be becoming a norm. About the institution of me, I think that, since we're talking about Islam here, a lot more Muslim families are more conscious about being Muslim, so they're very, very strict. They do their best, whatever they can. If the kids go to private school or government schools, after that they go to Islamic schools, but those who have money send the kids to Islamic schools all the way. And even universities, they try and encourage the kids to go to the Islamic University of Malaysia or other Islamic universities. Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Sort of. Or go ahead.
I would say, just to add to that even in Singapore there is even though in the Quran there is a verse that says a Muslim man can marry people of the book, right? The Sharia law as it is formally practiced in Singapore only allows a Muslim to marry, two Muslims to marry each other. But if you want to marry a non-Muslim, then you have to go under the civil law. And so there's a social stigma about doing that. That has a view that this is living in sin, kind of thing. It's interesting. We also had the Mufti of Egypt coming down just recently last week, and he said that his idea of the people of the book is not just Jews and Christians, but also the Hindus, the Buddhists, basically any religion that has a holy scripture. Okay, but just to get, you had a question there.
I was recently in Malaysia actually on a spiritual retreat in a very isolated place called Jalan.
Is this a Hakim?
Hakim Ashar.
Yeah, I wanted to go, but I didn't go.
Oh, did you?
I had to work. But I went to his talk 2 days before that.
Okay. So I spent a whole week following that, being in KL, going to all his other talks as well. And I met a bunch of young Malaysians, Malay Malaysians, who were rather interesting. I mean, coming from a Singapore Malay perspective, right? They were very much into, they wouldn't call themselves Sufis, but they were very much into permaculture, into Islamic medicine, into really looking into the arts, music, as part of a holistic personal development. And I found that really fascinating because I have yet to find or meet young Singaporean Malay Muslims who have this focus in life. So do you see that as a generational thing that is like growing in Malaysia as a rebuttal or as they just want peace, they just want this lifestyle,
Okay, I was going to add to that. Actually, there are new trends. I know the group that does Crescent Collective, one of them, Justin is my cousin. I think these are the new young Muslims, right, who have been educated abroad, mostly from middle to upper middle class backgrounds, who also want that holistic Islamic lifestyle, really into permaculture and all. It's fascinating. I like what they do. I wanted to go to that workshop because they teach you how to do healing. I like Reiki and all that, but I couldn't go. But they're actually very small. There's a bigger group out there, and that group is, I know, they're kind of Sufi, they are very niche in that sense. But in Malaysia overall, it's still very dogmatic. There's a lot of big time sheikhs coming in, like Mufti Menk and all that, and people spend thousands just to go to his talks. Yeah. But what you saw, I see a small little trend. I think Piecemeal does that, and Crescent Collective does that, and it's quite fun. You don't feel that fanaticism. Some of them, when you go, oh my goodness, I didn't know there were other Muslims like this. But this group is it's got a hippie feeling. Everyone's very happy. So I like it. Yeah.
I felt so excited, and I was so stressed. Before we went, I was thinking, I was telling my friends, oh, should I go try keto? Should I go somewhere and reach out? But once I joined it was wonderful. Like how much I was accepted. Oh,
Yeah.
who I am, and it was here.
I think, if you don't mind me,
Yeah, okay.
I think the young Muslims in Malaysia are now, I think they observe a lot. So what they're doing is that they're creating their own little spaces. I was telling Nasri that this past 1 year, I've been meeting a lot of these young hijabis, very Yuna-like and all that, very observant and all, but they're creating their own spaces. I met 2 best friends, and they are educated and all, but they do this on the side. But they said, okay, this is only for our husbands. And I said, okay, what is it that you do? We're trained as pole dancers. I'm like, oh my god, what? Pole dancers? Yeah, and I said, we do this, but we only do this for our husbands. And I said, you want to come? I said, no, sakit belakang. I've seen those classes on YouTube, no way. But they are like, look, we're Muslims, we pray 5 times, we do all this, but we create out of it. You see this niche, yeah? Then I went to one dinner, and then there was a group of hijabis, also very modern, and they were offering each other thought. And I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, do you want something? I've never taken drugs actually all in my entire life. It's only been Western drugs. Oh no, you can't do it because it's only like alcohol that's haram. And I'm like, okay. But it's very interesting how they're creating their own little worlds. And I just wrote a column which was published today. 2 weeks ago, I met this young woman who I thought wanted to ask me to do some reports. And she was covered up. And she said, oh, what do you think I am? And I'm like, okay, I don't know. What do you want me to say? And then she said that, actually, I'm agnostic. Huh? And I went, wait, hang on. You're wearing this, how can you be? I don't get this. And she had her own spiritual path. And she says, I'm only wearing this so that nobody detects me. Plus, I come from a very conservative family, but I've lost my faith in Islam. I tell you that one, the whole day I'm like, oh, I've been told many things in my life. This was the first. And has a group of friends, all from private Islamic school, doing all this. And I said, you know, you're going to be in trouble, serious trouble in Malaysia if the authorities catch you. You're going to die. And she said, that's why nobody knows who we are. I'm not in trouble because for, you know, meeting this person. But you see the young trying to create their own spaces, trying to create, you know, trying to deal with their faith in their own way. Crescent Collective that, you know, organize that, they have rock bands and all that. They just did. How is this compatible with Islam? I says, no, Kak Dina, that's all right, you know, because we do this. We come not with our girlfriends, we come with our wives. It's very halal, Sharia compliant. And they go head banging here, doing there. Okay, my time, you know, when you talk about head banging, you go to Hard Rock Cafe and you really. So it's a different thing altogether. Is it a trend? It could be a trend. It could also be a lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, there's this term that has been bandied around, like the idea of the Muslim hipster or the hipster.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, we have a lot of these hipster cafes, you know, and these girls who come with all these glasses like ours and wrapped up like this, and then all this coffee joints. But it seems to be catching on, and the young like it, and they feel that, look, I am still obeying my faith. I am still following what it wants me to, but I'm young. I am allowed to explore and think. And I think that's pretty healthy.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is what you brought up. Like in the past, you would go to a Hard Rock Cafe. If you're going to rebel, you're going to rebel outside religion, right?
Yeah.
And now, if you rebel, you're using rebelling through religion in some sense, right? You're using the ethics of religion still, but using that as a form of, getting away from your oppression, which is working within the system in a way.
It's actually fascinating because, as I said, you know, while it's also angry, the young, you know, the ones who confide and tell me, they tell me different things, how they begin, even like dating, you know. There was this young girl who liked a guy, and they traveled everywhere together. And I'm like, okay, how do you do this when you're not supposed to be in the same room? This is Malaysia, you don't do things like this. And she said that, okay, we don't have sex. All right, so what do? You would travel. We put a bag between us and we share the same bed. And I'm like, hi, yo. I've never heard of this. But they find their own ways because we're dating, we're in love. They've broken off, you know. We're dating, we're in love, but we can't do this. So we put a bag in between the bed and we hold hands. And go, gosh, this sounds so Amish. You know, Protestant. I think that was like years ago. I saw one documentary that was how they dated. They had like, was that a cover? And they spoke to each other while the parents slept next. I'm going, oh my, the things that the young tell me. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah, question from the floor. Anyone? Yes?
What is your view on faith? Is it a positive or negative thing? Yeah.
Well, I think it's positive. Yeah. For me, I'm a Muslim. I may look like this, but I'm a practicing Muslim, and it gives me a lot of, solace. I'm not one of those Facebook mullahs who quote the Quran in the morning and go, you know, you don't do this. I don't believe. I like it to be private. For me, it's very personal. Should I take to the hijab? It's my decision. I don't want it to be state sanctioned or someone peer pressuring me. So it's very personal. It's also, it makes me feel good. Yeah. It's also a good way, you know, when people ask, why are you talking to yourself? I'm actually talking to God, you know. But everyone has their own spiritual path, I think. You know, some people, even my friends who are atheists, right? They find spirituality in other things. Maybe through yoga, maybe through meditation. We all have our own paths. It's how we engage with it. It's how we deal with it.
Yes? Really would like to hear a question from the floor. Yes?
I don't really have a question, but more of like, do you have any advice for Singaporean writers where, because you know that the freedom issues like about race, about religion, and make it sound open without, creating any disputes between different parties.
Just before you answer that, I'll just add on, because in Singapore we have this thing called the OB markers, which is called out of bound markers, and race, religion, and I don't know what's the one, sorry? And politics. These are like the taboo topics. We're not supposed to comment on stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. You have the internet at disposal. Will they monitor you? They might.
There's a big thing going on now with a blogger getting sued.
Wow.
There's a hot case going on. So yeah, and we've been talking about an internet code of conduct as well. You know about it, So
I think there are many ways of doing it. I mean, I suppose that is very restrictive, yeah? But you need to start pushing the boundaries. I mean, you don't have to go full on and offend. There are many ways of engaging with people on very sensitive topics. There are. You don't have to be hardcore or angry about it. You can actually say, look, this is the issue here. This is how we feel or what's going through with our lives. Now, how are we going to find ways of doing things? You can write. You were saying that in Singapore you don't have this column thing. Yeah, but maybe if you can work with an editor or if you have your own blog, you can say, you can write, look, I'm not here to fight with anyone. But as a Singaporean, these issues mean a lot to me and my community and my country. How do we engage with each other? Sometimes I think that a lot of these arguments that we have is because we are not taught or we just want to shout and scream and all that without listening to the other people. There are ways. You can still be diplomatic and come to a middle path.
that's so true. I mean, I read an article. I mean, this is probably one of those articles on Facebook that says that sometimes the best way is not to win an argument. I mean, it's just to sometimes losing is better in a way of trying to convince someone of your ways, right? Which is kind of true. I mean, and this relates to the public sphere when I'm thinking about it. Activists or lobbyists, right, have a cause they want to fight for, and they have to shout and and really go for those cause, right, and really fight for it. At the same time, this kind of a method might be pushing, like turning people off in some ways.
Well, you still need to push the envelope a bit. You have to. If there is a topic or an issue that needs to be brought about, it needs to be discussed, you will find a way. It just matters, whether you really want it or not.
Other questions from the floor? We have about 10-15 minutes more. Yes, we have a question from Jack.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
It seems to me that the liberal and the moderate elements of the society are rather fragmented, right? And it seems to me that ultimately it seems to be that only the conservative elements will triumph in the end. Alright, because their path is very clear, as you mentioned about Wahhabism and so on. So simple, so easy to follow. Whereas the liberal and the moderate elements are all very confused, they're all going in different paths. So this is very troubling. Right? That is one question, right? That is whether what we are going to see ultimately is the triumph of conservatism. And we see that happening. For example, Brunei, they have introduced Sharia law. And I think in Malaysia there is also talk that between states, there are some states which are going that way. Right? So there is a competition as to who is more conservative than the other. Right? So it seems to me that ultimately it's inevitable that the more conservative forces will triumph. Right? So that is one point. The second point that you can comment on. The second point I'd like to make is what you said earlier, where Malaysia or Malays in Malaysia are not using the word buka puasa, right? They're turning to Arab language. Now, we noticed that in Singapore as well, because I have overheard Malays talking among members of their own family in English. So this is a departure from what I
I've come to be acquainted with, in the sense that the more educated you are, the more likely you are to follow your Indian and your Chinese friends, and you abandon your own mother tongue. Alright? You want to show that you're globalized and you're English literate. Then you have the other group, you know, they are turning to Arab, Islam, Arab. So you find that if you want to be a true Muslim, the more Arabic you have to be. And it's a sort of a colonization, I feel. As a result, the Malay language is submerged, suppressed. Is it a form of colonization that in order to be a good Muslim, you have to be very Arabic literate, and therefore you have to suppress your own culture, your own indigenous language, you know? So these are things that have caught my attention, but I need you to comment on it. Perhaps Nazri can also share his thoughts on whether I am right in my own observations or it's just isolated
I'll just add
observation. Yeah?
I actually agree with you on the second part of the idea of Arabization. And I'll just share one short thing so that Dina can talk about it. Basically, if you meet someone who comes from a mixed race, right, a Malay and an Arab race, that person would normally say that he's Arab, but kind of submerge his Malay identity. And so the Arab race, I mean, there's a hierarchy of what is better, right? And being Malay is always at the bottom of it somehow, in terms of, so maybe it's because we've been racialized so much, and then, in terms of education, the Malays are also like the last and stuff like that, right? So this idea of becoming a Malay in Singapore, at least, I also have noticed, it's not something that you want to be sometimes. Okay, that's my comment.
I have to agree with you that sometimes I think that Malaysia is trying to outdo everyone else in being more Muslim than everyone else. Yeah? And this Arabization of our culture and language, when you systematically change the education system all the time, right? And which is also fueled by insecurity about your race, your religion, this is what happens. I have a friend who was actually commissioned to do a lot of design work for a museum. I won't mention which museum it is. And he reads a lot of history. So he was writing and doing a design, and the author came from the top. You cannot say that we Malays had a Hindu tradition. We've always been Muslim. Malaya or whatever has always been an Islamic country, even during the caveman's time. And I remember my friend going, huh? You must be nuts, But the need, especially for us, we're very different from Indonesia. Sometimes I wonder why we need to be, we don't want to embrace that past. It's that everything is shirk. That is Zaman Jahiliyyah. We don't want to have anything to do with them. We have always been Muslims, so we're trying to, this is guilt or some complex. I remember arguing with a friend. I said, we have beautiful baju kurungs and kebayas. Fine. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be tight fitting, it can be loose. It's a beautiful national costume. Why are you wearing a jubah? Actually, it's fashion. I said, well, if it's fashion, I don't know, I don't see, unless it's one of those beautiful luxurious kaftans. This is a jubah, but we already have this. We are Malays. Why are you substituting me for something that's very Arabic? And what? I remember at that time, I did not know the meaning of Jazakallah. What on earth is that? I said, I'm Malaysian. I don't understand these words. And she said to me, well, then it's because you're not a proper Muslim. And I'm going, okay, this was like maybe 10 years ago. I had a bit of a headache there. I'm going, wow, to be a good Muslim, we have a complex, and again through history, because of what we've been taught here, and who had been teaching us what Islam is. This is why we are what we are, I think. And again, we've never been taught to think critically, yeah? That we just accept. As long as in the ulama, you have a little bit of religious knowledge, that's it, we believe in whatever you say. And that is very worrying because we have a lot of religious shows on TV. And you know, when you're a journalist, right, somehow your instincts will be honed over the years. You kind of can pick up who is very legitimate, has scholarly, you know, credentials, and some you think, oh, I will not go. But for many, many Malaysians, like we have this Azhar Idrus, you know, he talks a lot of really idiotic stuff. But it's okay. He's got like 3-4 wives, he's got all these cars, people are giving him all these Ferraris and all. But as long as he talks, that's good. And I don't understand this total acceptance that if you're a Muslim, you must support everything. And I know that the culture of Islam, there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of arguments. When you talk about how the Sahabas talk to the Prophet, and after that all the intellectuals, we seem to have lost it. It's all about believe what they say and don't argue.
Yes. Yeah. Very true about that. I'll take 2 more questions. Yeah, 1 question. And 1 more? Yeah, 2 questions. All right, then we go.
Hi. This is a bit off the subject, but might you be able to tell us a little bit about your own creative process in writing or in any other things that you do of a creative nature?
Okay.
And this will be the last question. No, one more question?
You said that religion was, or spirituality, whatever, was a solace to you, but it's also the cause of so much trouble and divisiveness in society. So I'm really wondering, should we all just abandon our spiritual roots and just survive by not going to war with each other and just being agnostics? Or I'm just being controversial.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, what's my creative process like? I don't draw. One of my best friends this year gave me a coloring book for a birthday present. I'm like, oh, I'm not 6 years old, I'm 45, why do you give coloring books? But that actually has helped me, when I travel, I just color. There's no matching. It's absolutely schizophrenic. It's like, oh, polka dots everywhere. But it actually releases you, yeah? But if you want to talk about writing, I have notebooks. When I married my husband, he said, oh my God, I've never had such an untidy woman in my life. I have post-its everywhere because in the middle of the night, as I go around, even in an apartment, I have an idea and I don't want to forget it. So I'll write things on post-its, on papers and all that. Sometimes I actually ink it on the mirror with a lipstick, and he'll come and say, you throw it in the house, and I'll clean it up. So that's my creative process. And after that, certain things I write very fast. But there are certain things that will take months because I need to mull it over. And I will just write in my notebook. I'll just write, and I'll just let it sit and I'll come back to it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I do have superstitions. I only, it doesn't matter what the brand is, but the cover of the notebooks are all black. It started from young, I don't know, and I did try to change. I can't be having black notebooks. I'll try red and nothing came out, so I went with the black. So it's maybe just a psychological block. But also I think my creative process with the work I do is just generally meeting people. People tell me stories, and I'm like, okay, do you want me to write about this? I said, yeah, that's why we're telling you this. Then I go back and I do a lot of field work. I go out. I do a lot of corporate work now that I've left, and when I have a break, I go off into the wilds of Malaysia, meet the people out there, get some stories, and write about that. So that's my creative process. Well, you know what? Even if you're an atheist or agnostic or whatever, there will always be a war. Yeah. So you can have either a religion or no religion. Everyone, we are human beings. We will always fight.
But my argument is that maybe religions make us more to fight about. Allah, like you can say Allah.
Well, it could also be about the economy. It could also be about class. Yeah. So it's a whole band of things. So I wouldn't just say that religion is a cause of thing. Look at now, you know,
Yeah.
poverty now.
Right. I mean, if you look at the countries that are non-religious, like communist countries in the past, there have always been conflicts within as well, right? Yeah, so thanks a lot. It's been a great discussion, I thought, and I think I thank the audience and Dina a lot for